A word to the wise. We are an explicit podcast tackling choicey adult themes as well as entering spoiler territory if you aren't caught up with us yet. Today we discuss a new planetary body, and Kross gets angry on Phobos' behalf because she is a small one. I guess I should tell you about what we're actually reading, though. It's chapters 35 through 42 of Morningstar, the third installment of the Red Rising series by Pierce Brown. If you don't know what that is, you've got a long way to read because this is the third book, as I just said. So catch up.
Hey there, this is Kross.
And I'm PJ.
And we are Words and Whiskey, a podcast for veteran and novice readers alike. We tackle fiction novels and love to talk about what we're drinking. Think of us as your drunk weekly book club.
I wish I was drunk at this point because Crossland keeps singing this ridiculous song about the sun and how uninhabitable it is for us human mortal people. Apparently it's from They Might Be Giants, which is a great band, but dude, you are not them. They are better at singing than you are.
That's just a fact, but like I can't stop. You're just taking too long writing your filler today. All right, so today is our 6th episode covering Morningstar
all day. The whole recording.
Every time you kept the whole recording, we just started. Every time you would like pause for too long while we were going through notes, I would just start singing it. You're right. This is my fault.
Yeah.
Today is our 6th episode covering Morningstar by Pierce Brown, and we're here to discuss the first half of Part 3, Glory, covering chapters 35 through 42. But first, let's talk about what we're drinking. What are you having today?
So I picked up some goodies from the liquor store as far as like small bottles of like extra mix-in liquors and ingredients. So I made a Benedictine sour. Benedictine is kind of a spiced honey liqueur, really, really flavorful, sweet. So it is 2 ounces of bourbon, 1 ounce of lemon juice, and then instead of the ounce of simple syrup or the half ounce of simple syrup, it's actually 3/4 of an ounce of Benedictine and 1/4 ounce of simple syrup. So that's sort of takes its place a little bit. Shake it, pour it over ice, and then I garnished it with a lemon twist and a maraschino cherry. Pretty solid. I think I would have gone a little bit heavier on the Benedictine. It's a little bit lost with the lemon, but overall, happy with it. To follow that up, I have the last crowler that I've got from Lupulin from that last time I visited. This is Visual Hardness, which is a sweet stout with coffee and vanilla. So excited to give that a shot. I haven't had it before, so you'll potentially get my raw reaction on air.
Nice.
Yeah. What have you got?
Sounds really tasty. I am having a pretty like easy, quick standard because I was running a little bit behind going into this today. So I'm having a grapefruit old fashioned. So basically just your standard old fashioned with bourbon, simple syrup, grapefruit bitters, and using a grapefruit rind to infuse it with that, bitter aroma. It's great.
Nice.
It's just a little different, little twist, And then I'm following that up with the Voodoo Ranger that we talked about last week that I like could not remember the name of. It's called Higher Plane because I'm still going through that, of course. So yeah, Higher Plane. Very good. Very good. Just going to be pleased.
Nice.
Good standard drinker, good form.
Good
All
deal.
right. So we have a lot to cover today. There's a lot of ground in this section. So
I feel
we're
like
going to
we
try
always
to
jinx ourselves talking about like, oh, this is the longest episode we've had. All right. Here comes the bomb of a next week's episode.
Yeah.
You chose all you choose where we read to. So I don't know why you're complaining about it.
Well, I feel like this was the best I don't know. I mean, maybe I could have done it on the chapter before, but I really liked this, this point right here. So I feel like it leaves good speculation.
Hanging it up right before the final chapter of this would have been good if it wasn't super easy to see, like
exactly where it was going.
Yeah. If the title of the next chapter wasn't so bold.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. So we've got a lot to cover. We're going to do our best to give it the usual words and whiskey treatment. The good news is that this is filled with a lot of plot, character discussion, other things like that. There really isn't any sort of weird tangents to dive into outside of my obsession with Phobos and meteors. So here we are. Now we're here. Let's talk about last week's predictions. So there's a...
Did any of them come true?
No, you're drinking for all of them. There's no Deadpool.
Okay, we're good.
So Noah died, so we don't have to talk about or worry about that. So the first question we asked is, do they all make it out of Tino / away from the pole? You said...
Well, I mean, yes, with the Obsidians, but some died on the way out, and I don't think anyone died, did they?
No one died on the way out. But like Ragnar's dead, which you said, I asked him, do they all make it out? And I kind of assumed originally with the question that it was character driven. And you're like, yeah, they're all going to make it out.
That is what it was. Okay.
So, yeah. I'll give you 50% credit on this one. I'll take a
I already took it.
I'm taking a sippy poo.
All right.
What's to be done with arrowed Cassius?
Arrowed. I love that term. I guessed and so badly wanted them to literally feed Cassius alive to the Howlers in the most brutal fucking way possible. But apparently they gave him a private room in the infirmary. Yes.
He didn't get a private room.
No,
it
wasn't.
Bed.
It wasn't. He got a bed.
Does a private bed count? Like if you're not sharing the bed?
I mean, in this space, probably.
Probably. It's probably something.
Yeah, but yeah, no, he didn't get eaten by his fellow classmates.
Yeah, definitely. So with that, you drink.
Yep. Still didn't learn whether or not Darrow has gold or red spermies. Still don't know about Ephraim.
Yep. Lots of questions still floating out there. So
those are the important ones.
Those are the only important ones. Let's be real. So with that, let's get into the chapters.
Let's dig fast through this because we have so much to go through.
Yeah, we're gonna stall, I'm sure. Looking at the document, I'm like, huh. So our average show is like 3 pages, and right now we're at 11.
Are we seriously?
Yeah.
Holy fuck, Crossland.
Well, okay. Actually, let me clarify. Our average show is 9 pages because there's the glossary on the back end of characters and terms. So like the last 2 shows have been 9 pages. This one is 11 though. And
that's way less impressive, but it's still,
well, the extra 2 pages is significant.
They're dense.
Yeah. All right. So with that, chapter 35, The Light. We get the title of the book here right off the bat. Darrow, referred to as the Morning Star, the star by which everyone flies by night, everyone being the Obsidian Valkyries, and kind of the guide to them. And I really like the imagery that's painted here right off the bat. You know, the whole freeing of the Obsidians and then, you know, kind of equating him to this celestial body feels very archaic, old, kind of like the Obsidians would do.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. I think this makes sense totally as far as like being the name of the chapter, but I was really hoping, name of the book rather. I was really hoping it'd be something to do with Cassius and the Morning Night. And maybe it's still open for sort of a double interpretation, but I was wrong on that. I was really thinking, I put a lot into guessing that it was Cassius or the Morning Night in general.
That what was? That the Morning Star, the title was?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely fair. And I think that Cassius, to some degree, is, once again, a character that is within our grasp and we're able to talk to, as opposed to a terrifying figurehead in the distance, you know? So it's interesting that we get kind of re-submerged in his perspective here.
I mean, Cassius has already proven himself to be really, really important to the story, though. In the little bit of time that we've had interacting with him, he's given information that has, at best, secured a huge force for Darrow, and if not that, at the very least, he has denied that same force for the Sovereign.
So you think there's something to be said about, basically your conclusion here is that you're saying that there's something to be said about Cassius potentially being a Morning Star as well.
Or being in a pivotal instrument to the Sons of Ares and important enough to have credits within the title.
That's fair.
Even if it's shared credits.
Yeah. At the very least, you know, being the metaphor and where that's going. Makes sense. So they settle on moving all of the Obsidians into Tinos out of sight after rallying them all together, including, shaming some of the leaders killing themselves when they hear the news has spread. There's kind of a large gathering force of these Obsidians, and they move them all to Tinos out of sight for the most part.
I mean,
agree.
I'd really like to know what the percentage is, because it's tens of thousands of Obsidians, right?
Yeah.
And that's going to... How many people live in Tinos? In as crowded of a city as it is? I don't think it's more than 100,000.
I feel like it was 400,000. I feel like it's talked about later in the book.
Okay. It might have been mentioned, but...
By that, I mean later in this section. But yeah.
That's still so much crowding. But they do mention that a lot of people take positions on the ships in Darrow's fleet. So I'd be curious to see what percentage of Obsidians actually end up in Tinos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the section here that we've read, or not even the end, in the middle of the section here that we read, we do get confirmation that they all kind of leave Tinos for the most part, or that a lot of them leave Tinos and leave it empty. Not everyone, of course, but the majority of Darrow's fleet. But we can chat about that more when we get there, for sure.
Okay.
So we get to Tinos after, a half day of flying underground through caves and tunnels and whatnot. Do you trust Dancer regarding Cassius's safety and his restraints? Like, do you have trust?
I mean,
for how he's being taken care of?
Obviously, hindsight and everything, it makes this question a little bit silly to ask, or to answer, rather. But I did trust that he'd be at least kept safe, or safe-ish, alive. I didn't think he'd get a private room, but I was kind of surprised by how exposed he was in the infirmary.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it'd be something in between there. Maybe a room with a few more important people.
Yeah, and I think there's definitely something to be said when we get into the next chapter and kind of talk, or 2 chapters from now, and we kind of talk with him about a lot of these different things and decisions. I guess the reason that I wanted to pose the question is ultimately regarding Dancer's views on Golds. Now that he's actually working directly with Golds, we get a lot of moments of outbursts and things like that, even throughout the section. And we know that Cassius is safe in the immediate moment. But I guess, do you have any larger questions about where Dancer stands on things?
Yes and no. I'm interested in seeing where he actually stands on things, but at the same time, I know how loyal he has been as far as his track record goes. It doesn't seem that his opinions on things really make a huge impact on his decision making. Like, yes, there are certain decisions that he makes based on his own judgments and opinions and things, but for the most part, he seems very loyal and very willing to do whatever Ares or Darrow says.
It's interesting. I agree with you. I think that Dancer has a tough time because he has a strict set of moral values that he keeps in his head. But as we've seen throughout these sections and otherwise, he doesn't want to execute them with force, right? Like, he doesn't actually want to outright hurt anyone, if that makes sense.
Or
like,
jeopardize the missions. I think that'd be the more important one.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a more accurate kind of insider read. But I still don't think that he doesn't choose violence unless it's necessary. There's somewhere in here where he mentions that he's like a good socialist or whatever, or the old socialist. Yeah.
I think Darrow calls him that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's definitely true. I think he's got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, of course, being the son of Ares and whatnot, and being who he is, being a Red. Yeah, I guess it's just interesting to see. He's a lot more complex than he appears.
For sure.
So we move on to the conversation around Ragnar being a somber reflection between friends, between Severo and whatnot. And man, I get stuck on this. Like I said last week, the death of Ragnar is a big deal. It's a big moment in this book, in my mind, which is filled with big moments up until this point: the liberation, death of Trig, etc. I love kind of the ability of Pierce here to take this slow moment and go to this conversation between the two, saying, I think he'd always thought himself a blade before he met us. We let him be what he wanted to be, a protector.
Yeah. This whole sort of reflection on Ragnar between the two of them it was touching. It was sentimental, and I think it was as sentimental for the readers as it was for the characters. I liked the story that Severo told as a means of introducing the skulls that they had already sort of alluded to in the text. Just the different mental weight of actions versus coin in the eyes of different people. I mean, this is Severo sharing his virtual reality goggles with Ragnar, and he said it's something along the lines of like 400 credits. So it's probably pretty similar to the Oculus Quest that I have hanging on my wall right above my monitor right now. Like, yes, cool toy. Yes, not like a super cheap thing, but also not prohibitively expensive and fairly easy to come by if you're looking for it. But the gesture of Severo giving it to Ragnar was enough to be worth like a spiritual brotherhood immortalized by a tattoo. It seems really cool. It seems really, really interesting to think of it that way.
Severo's relationship, you mentioned this and alluded to it last episode or 2 episodes ago, but Severo's relationship with Ragnar grew off screen exponentially, right? It was a huge deal what kind of happened between the two of them while Darrow was gone. They were really kind of in charge of both the Howlers and the Sons of Ares at large that they knew of course, right, without Quicksilver's arm of the Sons of Ares. And so it's great to kind of get this additional backstory, you know, and like the reason that it matters so much between the two of them. I just like, I miss Ragnar. I wish I would have gotten to see more of those moments. You know, we get it in the candy bar moment that you talked about last week that you loved so much.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of the friendliness between the two. But yeah, you're right. It was the simple acts of kindness that meant the most to Ragnar. And that's why I think he, you know, obviously loved being called the Shield of Tinos. Like, that's why that was a huge deal to him, is, you know, he was able to shift his reputation as this terrifying beast in the arena and on the battlefield and everywhere else.
Playing with Darrow's nieces and nephews. Like,
yeah,
he was truly a friendly giant, even when he could also, I don't know, probably kill several people with one hand in a matter of a couple seconds if he really wanted to.
Yeah, he's a great character. You know what? I don't think we ever really talked about this, and I think maybe it's kind of late to do it here, but I think that it's worth mentioning. If you had to put someone in Ragnar's shoes as a casting idea, who would you kind of throw out there, if anyone?
Oh,
you know, like I think that where a lot of people lean is like immediately they're like, oh, well, the Mountain from Game of Thrones. Like, no, that's not right.
No, he's like they're thinner than that, aren't they?
The Obsidians? Yeah,
like they're not necessarily Icelandic beefcakey dudes. Like they're big, but they don't strike me as stocky as the Mountain is.
No, I mean, there's something to be said for the sheer size of, you know, the Obsidian. So they're significantly larger, of course. On top of that, they're, I think beefy or beefcakey or short, you know, I don't know. That is the right way of describing what they're not like. They're definitely not thin and lithe and muscular like the Golds are. They're definitely beefier than the Golds, but they're not
stocky.
Insane. Yeah, right. They're broad-shouldered, but they're not stocky.
Yeah. Honestly, I could see like it being a breakout role of a former NFL player or something who had an early retirement. Like just some super athletic dude who was big enough to actually play professional football or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I feel like Dave Bautista is pretty close.
Yeah.
Right? Like he's
pretty
fairly
close
if he were taller. Like much taller.
But at the same time, fucking movie magic.
Yeah. Right.
I don't think
they could totally.
I don't think we're going to find anybody that could actually fill the role.
No, they're going to have to stand on apple boxes in order to be the right size.
Like, I think most of these characters, if translated to a screen, will be CGI'd to be taller in some way.
Yeah, or filmed around. I mean, that would be the other part of it, right? Like you could shoot in different ways.
Yes, but there has to be a combination of that. Think of the Lord of the Rings and all the Hobbits. Like there were certainly filming tricks, but in the end, it was still VFX.
Oh yeah. There are definitely certain portions and parts that'll be that way.
Right.
Yeah, just like extending people's legs is difficult to do, you know? Like, if you think about Josh Brolin, the reason that Thanos works so well is because he's literally just green dot, completely artificial. So, and they had like a little flag above his head that was hanging off the back, like a poster. Yeah, that's how they managed to film that. I could imagine something similar for, a handful of important Obsidians, especially Ragnar. But
yeah.
I
mean, even Batista though might be too stocky for what I'm thinking.
Yeah, it should be mentioned. I'm kind of thinking someone like Batista. I feel like Batista is maybe the closest that we can get to someone who, like you said, is an ex-athlete, like an ex-NFL player, something like that. We just need to find kind of the right one to fill the role. Yeah. But yeah, I would agree. His lines are simple enough where, this sounds demeaning to the character to some degree, but like it's simple. You could coach someone to do this pretty cleanly, I feel like. And
you need somebody that could
still make it emotional.
Do really great action choreography.
Yeah, it's ultimately going to be the most important thing.
So it's gonna have to be somebody athletic. And you're right, his lines are relatively simple. They'll need to have a booming deep voice. And I mean, I can't think of that many like mainstream actors right now that check all of those boxes that are also like
Ron Perlman in his prime.
God, that'd be fucking awesome.
Right? Yeah, that's dream casting, but he has to be like 20 years younger.
Yeah, but I could see it. What about someone like Jason Momoa?
Yeah, Jason Momoa would definitely work.
He could do it, or The Rock, but that might be weird because of like all the other roles that he's been in and the fact that he has some inherent charisma that Ragnar probably doesn't actually have.
Yeah, I wouldn't probably put The Rock in, but I could see Momoa doing it within reason. Ultimately, it's not the same. It doesn't line up perfectly, of course, with some of the nature, and we definitely don't want to typecast Jason Momoa as a consistent guy. But I think
but
a great example is
well.
like him in C. Yeah, but like him in C. I've only watched the pilot so far, but
oh god, it's so good. I really do like that show.
So anyway, I just wanted to pick your brain since we hadn't talked about that at all.
Yeah, that's. I hadn't thought about it. I wish you would have told me you were going to ask me that so I could be more prepared. But
I literally just thought about it right now. So that's why we talked about it. That's just an extra little note here.
A little words and whiskey nugget for you.
A little bit that wasn't in the script quote. Nothing's really in the script. They're just prompts.
Yeah. He writes the questions and I get to think about it ahead of time. So
kinda. I kind of write the questions. They aren't really questions. They're most of the time they're statements.
They are mostly just statements.
So moving on to the next statement. What do you think of Sephiroth stealing all of the ships? I love when he gets called like the Goblin King while he's holding supremacy over Mars for a brief period. But what do you think of like the whole maneuver?
I thought,
and that entire
more than anything, I was impressed by how nonviolent it was and like how sneaky it was. They didn't let out a single shot the entire time.
Yeah.
And in conjunction with the Goblin King, also mangy little guardian angel as a descriptor is, I think, even better. I like that one even better.
Yeah. I like the callback to just the Goblin and calling him the Goblin King, of course. But I do agree with you. Mangy little guardian angel is fantastic. So I just think it's interesting. And I think Severo, especially in the last two sections of this book, and honestly in this entire book so far, has really gotten to shine as a character who isn't so much... I'm not saying he was a side joke in Golden Sun, but he definitely wasn't a huge focus until kind of Fitchner got revealed. He was there, he was around, but he was kind of angry, and he was more of a tool, kind of like most of the people in Darrow's lives were in Golden Sun. But here he really gets to shine and be a character, and I love all of the kind of heartfelt moments we get. Speaking of heartfelt moments, till Victra, what's this? Like, ooh boy, Victra and Severo. Ooh. Did you see that? It
caught me off guard, but ultimately, I'm really excited for both of them. I think it's going to be a better if they remain together. I think it'll be better for both of them. I think that'll kind of take the edge off of Severo, maybe make him a little bit less suicide mission-y.
Yeah.
And Victra maybe a little bit less seducey towards Darrow. That hasn't been on the table for a while, though. She hasn't kind of acted in that way since the last book, but...
No, yeah, she's still a little flirty just in the way that she talks, but,
But I think it'll focus both of them, and I think keep everything rolling a little bit more smoothly.
Yeah, I also think that the whole conversation about kids that kind of happens right before this and sort of the other lives that they could wish for, Darrow talking about, his potential other life that could have existed with Io, and Severo dreaming about children in like a future is an interesting change.
Yeah, it is. Certainly.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? Did you like it? What'd you think?
I mean, I think there's another conversation about it later, isn't there? No, maybe not.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think this is where we hit it for the most part with Severo. But
I think that hit most of the points I was thinking of, though. Like, I think both of them being together will level both of them out, and they'll be better than the sum of their parts. Though I think it can raise some complications in war room discussions, in that they're going to basically automatically vote together or strain the relationship, which will be either they can put things aside and vote independently on decisions, or things will get a little dicey when decisions are split.
That's definitely interesting. In a similar way, Mustang and Darrow they manage to disagree on their own, but they're also very different people. So
right.
That's an interesting twist on the whole thing, for sure. The final part that I really like about this chapter, everything is to like about this chapter, but the final thing I want to talk about is the line that comes shortly after the kids bit. You and I keep looking for the light in the darkness, expecting it to appear, but it already has. I touch his shoulder. We're it, boyo. Broken and cracked and stupid as we are, we're the light, and we're spreading. And it's great. Like, it's a great moment of revelation of, like, they're actually coming off kind of a victory to some degree between the two of them. I mean, obviously they lost Ragnar. That's a huge deal, but they gained this massive win in an armada, and they gained the Obsidians. Like, everything's going right for the most part.
Right. I think this is truly one of the most important things that they can both realize. It'll keep them sort of on the right path because it's the right path, not them searching for the right path as a means of salvation. It'll I don't know if I'm saying this right. I'm kind of babbling a little bit. What I'm saying is, if they realize that they are the light, the thing that they've been searching for, and they're spreading it around, that will focus them in a way that means that they can keep doing what they're doing, knowing that it's the right thing to do, as opposed to searching for whatever's going to make things happen and whatever's going to be right for people. Like, do you get what I'm saying? Like, I feel like I'm...
So to summarize, you're definitely onto it. I'd say that they're emboldened. They feel like they can actually make decisions now, and like they aren't floundering anymore. So, it's kind of they've been enabled by their success now a little bit, and so they can take the next step a little bit more confidently and realize that it's them now that they need to be looking to. Their decisions are ultimately important as well.
Right.
It's great.
Yeah.
I really like it. I think it's really important. So moving on to the second chapter, we have to talk about chapter 36, Swill, which is just great because the entire chapter is everyone's drunk and drinking and having a good time. So it's late at night, it's after midnight and everything. Victor and Severo, like we had mentioned before, are seemingly about to meet up near Severo's body, and it had a weird sexual connotation, which I hope not there, please, dear God. But other than that, great for him, like we'd mentioned before.
I don't think I have anything really new to add there. I think this is what I was thinking of when I said I think there's more later on. And
I thought you were talking about a different bit about the kids.
I was just talking about Victor and Severo in general.
Yes, definitely. That makes sense. So we move from that. We enter this moment of storytelling here between Darrow's family and the Golds he's closely become acquainted with. We've got to drink with them since they're drinking here and talking about this.
Absolutely.
But what'd you think of like the family stories? I really kind of like the warm environment of this.
I mean, it seems it's friendly. It's family. This is a family gathering. This reminded me of Christmas at my great aunt's house with my entire extended family, which, by the way, is where I feel the shortest in this world. But it's just... everybody's having a good time. Everybody's mingling and chatting and sharing stories. Sometimes the same stories we've shared every year for the last decade. Like, Doesn't matter. It's fun. It's family. That's the vibe I got off of this. But drink, motherfucker.
I don't know if you heard, but I cracked my beer and took a drink while you were talking.
I didn't. I was talking too loud.
That's fair. Yeah, no, definitely cheers. And I love the moments that are contained here where they're all kind of ranting to each other and they're even debating what story to tell Mustang about a little bit later, which is great. They're finishing up a story about the Institute and clearly sharing those stories back and forth. Cavax is feeding Sophocles blueberries, which, it just pays to mention, of course.
When
Sophocles.
You're out of jelly beans, you got to do what you got to do.
And I think... Just to like put a pin in something that I think we had talked about a long time ago back in Golden Sun when we were introduced. I think really it's not so much that Cavax is old and brain damaged so much as he fucking loves this fox. Like he loves it like some people have their pets that are children to them.
Yep.
And like your fish are to you. So
fair.
Yeah. I think very similarly, he just dotes on Sophocles every chance that he can. He definitely, as mentioned, has, gotten bumped on the head a few too many times, but I wouldn't call it, I wouldn't call it the dementia that we were kind of talking about.
No,
before.
I didn't think dementia. I thought just fucking
manipulation,
just fucking wild.
Yeah.
Outlandish.
I wouldn't say he's not wild.
Thoughts.
He's definitely still crazy.
Yeah.
We definitely love him for that, but he's definitely a little bit more stable than we give him credit for.
Right.
So I love the story Darrow's mom tells about him and the watch. Like, that story is so Darrow, right?
Yeah. But I thought it revealed a lot more about his mom than anything else. I felt like.
Yeah.
And I guess I should probably explain. I think it sort of explains how sentimental she is about things. If you remember earlier, there's the story of the gloves that Darrow's father's gloves that Darrow tries to get rid of, and his mom kind of hits him and tells him that they can't afford that and he has to go get them back. And that always struck me as odd because I felt like it seemed like she was more sentimental about it than actually worried about the economic impact of giving away the pair of gloves. And this kind of reinforced that a little bit. The gloves were something that her husband wore every day, and they were literally like leather gloves, so they were shaped to his hand specifically. So that's clearly something that's not easy to let go of. But this watch doesn't necessarily have the same utility or shaping that the gloves did. So, but it is presumably more expensive. So she held on to it, but didn't really protest when it was traded because it was worth it to get the medicine. At the same time, though, she didn't do that herself, even though they were struggling and trying to figure out how they could get money for the medicine. She didn't think of it or decided not to trade the watch. And for somebody who comes across as fairly cold and fairly utilitarian, it was nice to see that little bit of warmth and sentiment come through.
I think that's a great read, PJ. I applaud you for that because that's actually not something that I had picked out of that section. I always thought of it as more, I guess, like I don't necessarily, I see 100% what you're saying about mom and not being willing to take the watch and sort of the sentimentality of that. I guess I've always thought of it as kind of like she forgot about it to some degree.
That's totally plausible. Completely plausible.
But I don't think that changes the sort of warmth, right? Because someone who is so utilitarian, like you're saying, would be keeping track of all of the different things to ensure, they had all of their resources in line so that they knew what they could utilize when they needed to.
Right.
And so I think that regardless of that read, I think you're still right.
Mm-hmm. I guess where I was coming from was less that she didn't necessarily keep track of it and just kind of forgot about it. But more to the fact that if she was strictly utilitarian and strictly not sentimental about things, that watch would have been gone way, way sooner, like not long after Darrow's father died.
Without a doubt. That's a great point. She would have at the very least taken the income.
Right.
But Darrow coming back with it is obviously a sweet serenade to the end of that story and paints him in a positive light that kind of makes everyone kind of hem and haw about how nice and cool and sweet Darrow is and how he almost not telling a story about him, like almost blowing something up or some kind of funny, jokey story, instead telling something very serious.
Right.
So it's nice. Daxo's interjection about, yes, I would say that was quite a disaster, referring to when Darrow attempted to get Mustang to meet his mom down in the mines previously in the last book, was one of the funniest fucking lines on this reread that I've experienced. I was like, oh my God, I feel like I skipped over that previously because that is just snark. It's just layered with snark. But I really thought it was funny. We shortly thereafter also get a moment that happens where Mustang kind of explains herself with the Telemonuses around, and they have a conversation about family and some of those meanings. What do you make of Daxo and Kavax making eye contact after Mustang talked about protecting those that she loved?
I feel like I have so many answers to that question, and it would collapse into a single question or a single answer if I knew what kind of look they exchange with each other. So if it's a look of sort of love and admiration towards each other, it could be like them recognizing within themselves that they also protect who they love, and that's looking at themselves or looking at each other like, yeah, we do that for us too. It could be a look of, I don't know, some kind of scheming or something like that, if this is based on and related to some information that they know about Mustang that Darrow doesn't yet. Like there are just so many different ways that could go. And I think that it's, without knowing what kind of look was shared between the two, it's impossible to answer that question.
Fair. I mean, hey, good little rapid fire there between the possibilities. I think that it's interesting.
Thanks for the feedback.
You're welcome. Family is all that matters.
You dick.
And you are family, says Kavax. Which I personally think is a great moment here. We talked a long time ago, back at the end of book 1, I had mentioned it to you and Bingham, and neither of you reacted with any kind of fanfare. I was so shocked by the nature of your guys' reaction. And I wonder if you feel differently about it now. But the fact that like Pax was killed because his name was pulled out of a hat, the murder hat.
No, that happens.
Sure.
That seems to be life in general. Like in the real world.
Wow. So the fact that he was killed out of the hat, like Pierce in his rough outline had a plan for Pax to be a very big deal going throughout this entire series, and the Telemonuses to be like an adoptive second family to him, to Darrow.
Right.
And finally kind of getting around to this point where we found a way into the family. You know, it's heartwarming knowing some of the outside information, but it's also just heartwarming in general, knowing that the Telemonuses genuinely care.
Yeah, they do.
About him. Yeah. Do you think that they genuinely care? Or do you think they care about by proxy of Mustang?
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's an important question.
I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think
Sure.
there's a little bit of both. I think they definitely see Mustang as family, and I think Mustang sees them even as more of family than her own actual family is. So I think they're close, and I think there's a lot of sentiment there. But at the same time, they seem to genuinely agree with the stances that Darrow takes.
Good point.
And what it means to be a good person.
Yeah. I was just thinking more generally about what it means to be a good person. I do think that they align with each other's ideals, which also helps. Just thinking about some of the other families and the way that they kind of line up. Good point. Especially with the way that they were raised and getting to have family meet family here. I think that also shows an alignment of sorts between the Reds, the Telemonuses, and Mustang. So
right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Definitely fair. What do you think of the Mustang, or not the Mustang? What do you think of Mustang and the Telemonuses analysis of Darrow's plan to take back the cities, to take back Mars, the whole underground operation?
What was their analysis exactly? Let me go back to that. This is on 287.
Well, so the Telemonuses were very afraid that the Obsidians were going to wreck the cities, basically, and that they were going to be locked in a war with the Sovereign regardless. So there were two different potentials. Raving warbands form, that's going to be a problem.
Yeah,
or basically they're going to claim the surface. They're going to claim the surface, and they're going to be in a war with the Sovereign. They don't have a good way out of that with Mars without it under full control. And then Mustangs, real quick, just to summarize for you, was Adrius. Like you're not thinking enough about the Jackal.
They seem to be kind of the the people keeping him on track and sort of the checks and balances of the decision-making process. They're bringing to table a lot of insight and a lot of knowledge that while Darrow understands and knows all of this, he is juggling a lot right now, and things fall through the cracks. So having somebody to come through and like point out where some flaws are and where issues are, I think is the most important part of any sort of leadership, Darrow included. So I think they are solidifying themselves as his counsel. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a great fit for all of them. Yeah, that's a good point. And I do think that they're solidifying their roles as his counsel, especially as golds, right, within that circle. They're effectively opting themselves in to be the golds that he chats with and thinks and talks about the most. They appear to have the best grasp of strategy for the most part. I don't want to downplay Severo or Victra, but they're more like commanders versus strategists. Yeah. So what'd you make of the whole conversation in the background on Adrius about the puzzles and the nightmare of a child that he was? Dude, as soon as she faked losing the puzzle, I know for a fact, just based on his personality, that he did nothing for the next week but pour every ounce of concentration into creating the most brutal puzzle he could, because he was embarrassed by the fact that his sister feigned being beaten by the maze. Any sort of perceived slight against him will be met with the full force of his concentration. Yeah, I think the important part here isn't so much that she feigned it. It's more that he was frustrated with the fact that she figured it out in general. No, I think it's because she feigned it. So she didn't feign it. She did. What? She found it. After pretending that she couldn't complete it. She pretended she couldn't beat the puzzle, and he saw through that, and he's like, no, fucking finish it. And she does. And then next week he comes back with the most difficult one he's ever come with. Yeah. I was reading the preamble to that. Pretended I couldn't. Right. Yep. But it was the punishment that the thing that I was disconnecting was him punishing himself for whenever she would beat him. Right. Yeah. He would go alone. He'd like smile and play coy, but really be really fucking pissed off that happened in the first place. Exactly. To the point of like self-harm. Right. Yeah. Which is bonkers, of course, and kind of defines the Jackal as a strategist. It creates a really fucking cool villain and his backstory. Doesn't it? He's fucked. He's really fucked. It's so cool. Yeah. I'm very excited once we eventually wrap up this trilogy and we can talk about the whole thing as a piece of art. Mm-hmm. But we aren't there yet. So we've only got another 5 chapters to go. So before we finish out this chapter, and there the word is again, we need to assure that you're not aiming at being a dictatorship or a full democracy in the case of victory. Kind of the sentiment of Daxo and the insurance policy of what's to come after this succeeds. So full democracy is an interesting term, and you pointed out with the K at some point, I can't remember when, you pointed out that kind of lends itself to Greek democracy. Fun fact, I believe it was from the Discord server, Blood Silver, who pointed it out to me and was like, oh, you totally missed that. And I was like, oh, duh, that's what it is. And then I mentioned it on an episode, but did not properly credit. So there's your credit. But yeah. Okay. It might have not even been on an episode. You might have just been talking to me. It was definitely, I got corrected on it in the Discord at one point. Okay. I know I did. Gotcha. Which Sounds is why good. I mentioned it in the episode. Yeah. Gotcha. All good. Anyway. So it'd be interesting to see the distinction in their eyes of what full democracy versus what just a standard democracy would be like. As far as sort of a full democracy, I would assume would refer to an entirely popular vote with no sort of representation beyond strictly one vote is one vote is one vote, regardless of who you are. Versus having sort of a Senate or a piecemeal representation. I think a sort of a representative Senate-based democracy seems to make the most sense for everyone involved and for what the stated goals of the Sons of Ares are. But I'm sure there are a lot of Reds that would rather have, like Dancer, I think, would rather have just a flip of the pyramid, knowing that they're the most populous as Reds. They're going to win a popular vote every time.
Yes, of course, because they've got the most numbers, right? So exactly. That's kind of what they're ensuring, is that there's some form of representation. There isn't really a firm answer here on what they're seeking. They're just trying to ensure that either they aren't going single-minded with Darrow as some kind of dictator, or I think I agree with you on the read of the full democracy being everyone gets a single vote on every single issue. Yeah, which of course would mean that some people would
Red just rules.
Right, which is majority rules, which is the way most systems, in theory work. But yeah. Mm-hmm. So moving forward, chapter 37, The Last Eagle. And I just had a mental moment of clarification here. He's not technically the last eagle, right? Like, I understand his mom married into the family, took the last name, everything like that. She's a Bologna by marriage, which I guess makes him the last blood eagle Bologna, but I don't know if I fully agree.
Is she useful at all?
Why does use determine whether or not you have a last name?
No.
You're still alive.
No, but if you're, as far as the imposing attribution of an animal towards you, like this seems to be sort of a
you're
wartime
talking about a metaphor.
Yes.
You're thinking about
the use of the animal seems to be sort of a wartime metaphor for each of the members of each house. So if they're out of the fight, so to speak, what use do they have? And
sure.
Is it really worth calling them or taking them into account?
Yeah,
which I think is the point here.
I don't know. She's no Iona Bologna, so. Had to work it in, man. Okay. Anyway.
Iona Bologna.
Ridiculous. So, I really,
how much shit do you
like,
think Pierce Brown has got for that fucking name?
It's really funny, and this is maybe we have a couple of longtime listeners. Some of them participate in some of the Hail Reaper trivia nights, and I got a message from one. I believe it was Donna, who messaged me and said that she got a question before anyone else did because she listens to our show, and said that she will never forget Iona Bologna because of all the jokes we made about it and how we say it, which is great.
Do people pronounce it a different way?
I don't know, but I think most people forget it because it's just, it's something that's it's a minor detail, and we really like to dig into all of the minor details. That's what we
like to make fun of people's names is really what it is.
Also that, and it's rhymey, so I'm not going to not rhymey it.
Yeah, well,
Okay,
poet.
Yeah. I'm not Roke, though. Fuck you guys. Now you see where I was really offended with that. So, anyway.
I'll still hold on to that one.
Fuck. Okay, so getting into chapter 37, the scene of the infirmary is just haunting. When Darrow finally makes his way over to Cassius's bed before they wheel him away somewhere private to discuss what he, called him there to talk about, the whole scene is... It's a dramatic shift from the joy of the last scene to this very dark side of war.
Yes, but at the same time, you still get the same sentiment from Darrow. You get the same interaction. He takes as much time as he can to interact with the people that are infirmed. He laments about not being able to interact with every single one of them, mm-hmm. which I think that's, while it's a different demeanor of the room and a different mood in the room itself, I think that is a bit of consistency that I think is worth holding on to and worth noting how, mm-hmm. and it shows through his leadership as well and through his goals and through everything about his personality, but seeing it in action that he cares about everyone that he, what would you call it, employs at this point? Leads,
yeah, follows him.
Yeah.
Either way.
But beyond that, just everyone in general, he has compassion for.
Yeah, I think the part that I get hung up on to some degree inside of this chapter, inside of that little piece, is them all reaching out to him and a lot of the other sort of mystery and mythos surrounding Darrow feels very messianic. He feels like he was a martyr that came back to life, because that's kind of what happened to some degree. He didn't literally come back to life, but
he is.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely a component of that that's laced throughout this story in particular, and he has this. But we're also trapped in his perspective, and he doesn't think like that at all, right? He doesn't think himself a messianic figure. He mostly thinks he's a fuck up and is mostly confused about what he's doing. He's got the ultimate imposter syndrome. Yeah, he's also right. He's a fuck up, and he is confused.
Yeah, I mean, but I think you'll see that with most people. If you see any sort of hero from their perspective, the thing about compelling stories is not how heroic they are. It's how human they are while doing heroic things.
Without a doubt. I can't say it any better, so we're going to move to the next question statement. So, excellent work. We'll put a pin in that. PJ is the one coming with all the insight now. I'm just going to let him talk to himself.
Yes, this is what I want, Crossland. I'm trying to figure out. Did you listen to?
No, I just came back into it when you were talking still.
Right. So yep, I was still talking. But I've been toying with the idea of finding a new co-host, but I think I could just do it myself.
PJ, we still have five chapters to cover.
5 chapters left to do. See, I can do your voice perfectly.
We're at over an hour now. We have so much to go. So. That was a good call, though. It was about my voice perfectly. So, what did you think about the initial dialogue exchange between the two? The first real, friendly, and I put that in quotes, friendly air quotes banter we've seen them have since the Institute. I mean, what do you think?
Friendly is so beyond what this was. This is not explicitly hostile. No, this is not explicitly hostile, and that's the best thing you could say about it. They're not actively trying to kill each other. I don't know if that counts as friendly.
I think it's worth backing up a second even and saying that this is the first time that Cassius isn't trying to kill Darrow since he had just emerged from the box. Technically, is the only other time. But
how many times have they run into each other since the end of the first book? It's been several, right?
Cassius
is really bad at keeping his blood oaths.
Well, that's fair. Darrow also isn't very good at following up on gold culture, so he's also very bad at keeping his blood oath. Blood war, blood feud.
Yeah.
Yes, this isn't friendly necessarily, but there is still a kinship that's here that isn't there later in this chapter.
I think,
or in this section.
I think a lot of that comes out in reading into it after knowing what Darrow's said about Cassius and why he didn't kill him right away. So you get that sort of train of thought and put yourself into that mindset. But if you don't do that, I think it just kind of comes across as business.
Yes, I think Darrow a lot of the emotions to say.
A lot of the emotion is subtext and might be reading into it more than what's actually there.
We're going to keep talking about that emotion and that subtext, though, because that's what we're here for, PJ.
Fair enough.
So literally the next question
I'm
is
here
about
for
the
destruction and war, though.
Well, maybe next week. So it's great how much the section lends to building Cassius's character, though. It very much serves as a backbone to why he is the way that he is, or why he chooses to do what he does. Ultimately, he's asked the question, why serve her? And he replies, duty. And that's just one of many examples over the course of this that shows that Cassius still has a moral backbone and an obligation.
I think that makes it even stronger. Knowing that he went through the Institute and maintained some level of leadership through most of it is kind of astonishing in that respect, because he is so determined and so much a follower. He is such a follower that he will lead as a means of winning, because that's what he was told to do, and then immediately go into sort of lapdog territory. And it's not odd, but it is unique to him in this respect. There aren't many that do the same thing, that were in the same position that he was in. You know? Anybody who was a leader at the Institute kind of maintains themselves as some sort of leader outside of the Institute.
Yeah. But I think, and I'm trying to extrapolate this from what you're saying, Cassius also chooses to follow and be a servant.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like
he's got a moral
time.
obligation that transcends his individual needs or wants, it feels like. Whereas Roke, and we're just going to pull at the end here for a little bit, but whereas Roke is very driven by his own moralistic revenge, and he uses whatever means he can to morally justify it.
Yeah, but at least that's his own moral compass, as opposed to someone else's.
Oh, as opposed to Cassius being driven by someone else's and being a follower. Yeah, sure, that's fair.
Yeah,
but that's because he believes in duty to the society.
Yeah.
It's an interesting dichotomy between the two, because I think Roke uses the society as an excuse for why he behaves the way he does, and Cassius kind of stands proudly and says, I do this because
for the society.
For the society. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an interesting comparison.
It is, certainly.
It's definitely an interesting component. Came out like the side of my mouth. There's so much in this chapter. It's so small, but there's so much to talk about. Did the Sons of Ares, so this is a quote from Cassius, did the Sons of Ares rob a deep space asteroid warehouse in March, several days after your escape, about 4 months ago? Their replies, be more specific. Designation S-1988, silicate-based junk asteroid. So, fun fact, this is actually a type of junk asteroid. So S designates the S type of asteroid. The number that follows generally has to do with just nomenclature that we established to point at asteroids and say, that's number 1, that's number 2, that's number 3, based on their discovery. S is a very common type of asteroid. There are subfamilies within this. 1988, though, there is no 1988. And so that's where my brain went, why is there no 1988? And so I went and I looked up Pierce Brown's birth date, and it's 1988. So I'm going with, this is not confirmed. This is pure speculation. But S-1988 is that way because it lines up with Pierce Brown's birthday year. That's just an assumption here.
That makes sense. That's pretty cool, though.
1988 had a lot of really good books come out, too, but none of them really started with S that were relevant. So I kind of shook my head and gave it a pass because I thought that could be what it was, but it's not at all.
Gotcha.
So that was where my brain leaned, but nope, nothing there. However, we have to finish out that thought. There are 500 nuclear warheads that were stored at designation S-1988, and they were stored in case the Ash Lord ever needed to repeat Rhea. The depot lies between the core and the rim, and they're missing.
So this little bit prompted me to look into the nuclear arsenal of the United States of America. Take a stab at the number of nuclear missiles or nuclear warheads that the U.S. has.
I'm going to say what I said before, and that's like 300.
5,800. 2,000 of them have been decommissioned and are awaiting,
which I think was an
disassembly.
Obama presidency thing.
I think so.
Okay.
But I mean that's been a long time for them to still not be disassembled.
And these are confirmed in text. They're 30 megatons each.
36,
that we're
I
talking
think.
about with these. 36. It says 30.
Does it say 30? Okay.
It says 30. Yeah.
So that's significantly stronger than any of the ones that the U.S. has. The U.S.'s biggest ones are 1.2 megatons.
Wow.
So although this is 500 versus 5,600, that's still more
total
power,
massive.
Total power.
Yeah. Wow. I think it should be discussed, but the largest nuclear explosion ever by force was Tsar-Bomba. By Russia. It was an H-bomb, hydrogen bomb, and that was 50 megatons, which is more than these, but incredibly expensive, ridiculous to produce, and largely unnecessary. There's been one. Yeah. They tested it, and that was very close to everyone shuddering and going like, oh, fuck, we shouldn't do this to each other. Like, just because we can doesn't mean we should, which is also what was happening here, though, is this is very much a case of like, why the fuck would you do this? And the defense that the Sovereign provided, that Cassius parrots, is in case the Ash Lord ever needed to repeat Rhea. And
yeah,
fuck Octavia.
So Going forward a little bit, just because this is relevant, there's the conversation where Roke is saying that this is just in case, like this is just a preventative measure. I'm assuming that the Lords of the Rim Moons, or like the Rim Lords, I guess, were part of the conversation where they decided that 5 megatons would be the cap. I would guess.
Yes, for intership warfare, it's a part of the compact, I believe.
Right, but
yep.
But as far as deciding that 5 megatons would be the cap, I would assume that they'd be part of it, and like that was an agreement made on behalf of the Rim Lords. So for Roke to just kind of cavalierly say, "Oh, that's just in case of us needing it," is complete. Like even if they're like not wary of them using it against them, which fucking why would you not be wary of that? That's still directly counter to whatever pact they made, right?
Yes, it is definitely counter whatever pact they made. It's also, I mean, I really like this little line from Darrow. Repeat, Rhea, that's who you serve? A woman who stores enough nuclear warheads to destroy a planet just in case? Which is... Yeah. Like, my God, for some reason in my brain, I've got it locked in my head that they had a cap on the warheads being at like 5 megatons and only 20 of them. There's some arbitrary rule that's in my head there that was established in the compact. And this is just so far exceeding that because they thought that they could get away with it and hide it, that completely invalidates a lot of that perspective.
But I guess my point is that Darrow could even say, "You're right, we falsified this like footage," but they still went against your compact, and still probably sway the Lords of the Rim.
Yeah, sway Romulus and whatnot. Yeah, it's a nightmare for sure here. So we find out why he's decided to pass the information, which I think is ultimately the most important part. And that's because the Jackal is weaseling his way in to usurp control from the sovereign, either by force, of nuclear annihilation, political machinations, or through sheer economic willpower, because he's also stealing all of the helium-3 off the top and skimming that too, just for kicks. Just absolutely devious machinations. And my question for you is, do you think that he would use the nukes against people?
Yes. Yes, I think he'll use the fucking nukes, Crossland. What part of his personality makes you think that maybe he'd hesitate in using the nukes? I think he would. I think he's so fucking trigger happy with the nukes that like he has cut off his own thumb at some point to stop himself from launching the nukes. Like, of anybody in this entire story that could be using nuclear weapons, I think he is number one on the list.
Yeah.
What kind of fucking question is that?
Yeah, it's the necessary one, PJ. Don't scream at me.
Well, don't ask stupid questions.
Well, I knew the answer. We all know the fucking answer. Yeah. The Jackal, of course, is going to use the nukes. The question really comes down to how and when and why. And there's worthy speculation here too about Harmony.
Yeah.
And the nukes that she may or may not have, or that may or may not have gone off, and all of the various propaganda insinuations. Has he been testing them? Was it Harmony? Is he giving it to the Red Legion? What's going on there?
Well, we know from context from when they saw the nukes go off that it was in a populated area.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't remember what it was off the top of my head, but it was not in like an empty, deserted test area.
Correct. It was within a city, I think, on a northern peninsula for some reason.
Exactly. Or southern, whatever it was. It was away, but it was still populated. My thought is that he is quietly ceding the nukes to the Sons of Ares, or not to the Sons of Ares, to the Red Legion, as a means of discrediting any sort of uprising in the eyes of the general populace, as well as, I don't know, sowing more chaos. It will allow him the freedom to exercise probably even more powers. And I don't know, I think that the Red Legion exerting atrocities across the Mars landscape will give him the justification of acting against all of Red uprisings in harsh, swift retribution.
Yeah. Good call.
So that's my thought is, I know our thoughts on Harmony having the nukes are strictly based on a speculation at the time of the nukes going off. And that's it. Like, they haven't approached it since then, and they didn't have any information. They just literally saw 2 nukes go off, and somebody said that could be Harmony, and that was it. But I think it makes sense.
There wasn't full context.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of a nightmare to sort out, but we're pretty sure the Jackal has them, so may have given them to Harmony. Harmony,
I don't think he,
as we know,
I think he gave Harmony like a couple nukes.
Yeah, not gave them all, but
like through several proxies, gave them the opportunity to find these nukes. You know, like pulling the strings like he does as the fucking Jackal puppet master.
Of course. So, chapter 38, The Bill. And this is interesting because the title chapter has previous merit in conversations that have been had with Lorne, and even within this book, pulled a quote from it. The bill, as Lorne often said, comes at the end. Now the pixies pay. And that was on 199 of this book, so it was almost 100 pages ago at this point. With that in mind, this chapter feels very looming, like it has long-term implications.
Yeah, like this is literally the itemized check of what you've done and what you owe.
Yeah, they're not collecting yet, but you're getting the bill right now.
Yep.
So, interesting based on all of the things that we've dealt with so far. Anyway, the screaming match that this chapter starts out with over the nukes is just absolute chaos and wonderful, and I love it. Everyone's freaking shit because Adrius has nukes, like they should.
Yeah.
But it's still great. I enjoy it.
Oh, yeah, as you should.
He created chaos. It's great. It's a good time.
Mm-hmm.
Severo and everyone else having some bullshit banter about the insane man having nukes. I mean, it just makes sense.
What if Severo had that entire stockpile of nukes?
That would be interesting.
Oh, what if Severo has the entire stockpile of nukes and has kept that from Darrow?
I would love to think that. It was kind of hinted at that Quicksilver had been raiding a lot in the outer regions, but I don't feel like. I mean, maybe there's a machination there. So we're in a meeting with all of these primary members, his up close and personal people that he spends all this time with, kind of thinking and talking about what the next steps are going to be. So first off, before we get into that, we talk about 208 Lacrimosa, and 208 Lacrimosa is double the size of Phobos, PJ. Did you know? Double the size. Twice. Sorry, twice the diameter of Phobos.
Oh, shit.
So it's much bigger.
That is much bigger.
Right, like that's nuts. It's stupid. I just constantly, every single time I hear an asteroid name in this fucking book, I'm Googling it immediately, or a moon or anything. I'm like, how big is it compared to Phobos?
Justice for Phobos.
Justice for Phobos. Also, I think that Phobos maybe isn't a moon by qualifications. Like, we call it a moon because it's a satellite and stays in orbit, but I don't know. It feels more like a rock flying through the sky.
I mean, what else are we?
We're a really big rock.
But big compared to what?
Compared to Phobos.
Yes.
Got him. That's some serious # planetary body envy.
Jesus.
Fuck.
Oh, God.
I got stuck on this. So, Lacrimosa, we'll jump back to reality. Lacrimosa, which is mentioned here, but not directly connected, is also shorthand for Our Lady of Shadows, or Sorrows, not Shadows, which is also the title for Mary, Jesus' mother, and the name in the Christian faith, and the name of the Pirate Cove, actually in the world, because the faith doesn't actually connect, because he was a person. Anyway, regardless, Mary, Jesus' mother, is frequently referred to as Our Lady of Sorrows. So, Lacrimosa, shorthand. He actually did kind of explain that here on page without the Mary thing, but didn't directly connect the two, if that makes sense. He doesn't like point to one and say it's called Our Lady of Sorrows because it's Lacrimosa, but you know, here we are.
Okay.
Justice.
I believe you.
What do you think of everyone's distrust of Mustang inside of the room?
I feel like we've talked about this a lot, and I feel like every time I feel like you've asked this exact question a lot, and every time I have the same answer. In that, I think she's been consistent. I think that she has proven herself, and I think that Victra has experienced the same sort of trial without need. Like they've both been blamed for their siblings and their parents unnecessarily. And I think that of anyone, Mustang is the one that has proven herself to be loyal and trusting and consistent and predictable within her own moral stances on things.
I would agree. I think that is a fine point, I guess. I think my trouble with it is that Victra went through hell to earn her place at the table and is now giving Mustang hell to earn her place at the table. And I agree with you.
That seems like a dick move.
Yeah, but nobody was batting for Mustang until Roke was. And we know that Roke basically bats 0. So why was he doing anything? I don't know. Should we trust someone's rogue opinion? And I think the other part of this too is that intentionally the book is trying to sow kind of a discordant note with Mustang. Should we trust Mustang? And I feel like you've generally landed on the side of yes, Mustang has done nothing wrong.
I haven't gotten that vibe at all. I've gotten the vibe of nobody trusts Mustang, but they probably should, because things would go so much smoother if they just trusted her.
Correct. My point was, I was saying what you were getting to, which is that you trust Mustang. I think the book does not trust Mustang textually.
No, I think the book is leaning too far into maybe we shouldn't trust her.
Yeah, well, that I agree with your spooky voice. So,
it seems overbearing in that respect.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to throw us off and trying to make us question it, even though I don't think it's something that we really need to question.
That's fair. What'd you make of the discussion around torture that's had shortly thereafter Mustang solidifies her place at the table?
Has she solidified her place at the table, Crossland?
PJ, I'm giving you your point. Take it.
No, I want to know. Okay. I thought it was interesting. I thought you and I talked about this ahead of time a little bit with Quicksilver, kind of using torture as a tool and realizing that there's a place for it and there's a need for it, and it will provide answers in certain situations better than any other means of discussion. And yes, it is just called torture a means of discussion, which isn't technically wrong, but is maybe a little bit crass.
Crass is the right word. I mean, it's not your fault. The book obviously asks the questions, right? So I agree with you. Well, yeah, but the book poses the question.
Okay.
I liked Quicksilver's take as well, treating it more as a panacea and less as a Swiss Army knife, right? Because it should not be used, and by Swiss Army knife, I mean used all the time for any various implement that it needs to be at any point, and more as a very selective tool. Yeah, right. As opposed to something that is for a very specific cause, need, service. And so that's where I leaned into the idea that, yeah, he's kind of right. And ultimately, it's funny because he even justifies what Darrow and Severa were going to do to Mateo, his fucking husband, to give away where Quicksilver was. It's interesting because they probably wouldn't have gone so far that they would need to kill him. He probably would have given him up easily, but he kind of forgives the idea in true capitalist libertarian fashion.
He didn't forgive or anything like that. All he said was it would have been effective.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. He didn't say anything emotionally either way. All he said was that if they would have tortured Mateo, he would have given up his location eventually, had he not passed out.
Yeah.
So we can read into that as much as we want, but I don't think it was him. I don't think it was him giving them a pass on it. necessarily, but at the same time, he was kind of understanding of it.
Okay. All right. He's definitely understanding of it, of course, as he's going forward. He's like, I understand why you would do such a thing, and that's also why he's saying that maybe we should consider what Severo's saying in terms of torturing Cassius, and Severo perks up, of course. But Victra definitely has the last word inside of the situation when she shows her back and the scars that she's earned and the scars that she's received. And basically, without saying too much or doing too much or really making, I don't know, she's clearly making a statement, but without outright decrying torture, she basically says no via body language and movement, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how else to put it. Like, she does say words, yes, but almost without words, she decries the idea.
Right. That's true.
So meanwhile, I mean, Dancer and Mustang are kind of having their conversations, and Severo has a fucking sideshow puppet show that is just so fucking funny. I am just so happy for Severo to be allowed to be the shit poster that he is in all of these meetings. He talks about screwdrivering Cassius's hand in like 3 minutes, or like 30 minutes with a buzzsaw he'll get him. And then he does this fucking puppet show. And I just fucking die of laughter every time. This time in particular, it killed me. The way that he like pops up one hand and then he pops up the other hand. And it's so good.
You can see it happening. Like, It makes it kind of sound a little bit more dramatic the way that it's described. But, like, I know for a fact that you've done the same thing in just kind of a, let's posit that we're having this conversation. Oh, what's going to happen here? Oh, I don't know what's going to happen here.
Exactly.
Like,
right.
That's just, I mean, people do that. But the way way it's described is fucking perfect. It's really well done.
It's so good. So good.
But I know for a fact that you and I have done that to each other before.
Oh, without a doubt.
Like,
without a doubt.
all the time.
Summarize each other's thoughts by just going, bah, 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 bah. It'll just be the move. But yeah, I laughed out loud this time. And I think that, as we mentioned before, Severo gets so much more growth inside of this book in particular. And he's becoming a very real highlight of the book.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty fantastic. So with that, we move on from the puppet show, of course, to the clear two sides of the different argument that we've already discussed, Dancer versus Mustang. And they stand for the same end goal to some degree, right? They both want freedom from the society. Mustang sees it as allowing lower colors to do as they wish, to not be a part of this oppressive system. Dancer sees it as getting rid of the gold hierarchy entirely as much as possible, and for allowing low colors that have been repressed forever, higher and greater levels of equality. I'm not doing this perfectly, and I understand that. Don't tear me apart for this, fans. But effectively, those are portions of the arguments that they're making.
Right. I think I know this isn't what we're necessarily trying to analyze here, but I think there's a decent amount of middle ground here. And I don't think that either of their thoughts or stances are mutually exclusive. I think that given some more calm time to really talk about things, they could come up with a path forward that would satisfy both of them perfectly well. But that's not the position they're living in right now. So it seems, at least.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they are on different ends of the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they ultimately both have good intentions. And I think that that's basically what you're saying, is outside of the textual comparisons of where they're obviously arguing, they could meet at similar points, even though they might disagree on the minutia.
Right.
Yeah. So after kind of their arguments that dissolve into paraphrasing, we get to the plan. Darrow wants to go to the Rim, fight Roke and Antonia's fleets like a raving pack of hungry wolves, like any good guerrilla warfare tactician might, knowing that that is potentially their strength, chooses to do so. So that is ultimately what we move into with the plan going forward. You think this is a good plan?
I mean, I feel like it's kind of necessary, but yeah, I think it's a good plan. I think they need the Rim, because the Rim, offers containment for the core just by existing to a certain extent. You can press in from there. It offers a lot of strategic advantages.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the difference is obviously the core has more potential opportunities to spin out to the rim, like we talked about before, but the advantages of having the rim on your side is obviously numbers, right? So deciding to go there, fight for potentially winning over the rim, to join their forces, to join up with Orion and everyone else, takes the ball into a different court and surprises everyone, right? It's a good idea. Right. It's a good move.
Exactly.
So chapter 39, The Heart. Chapter 39, The Heart. We'll just start off with a quote here that struck me from Darrow. It makes me smile thinking about how much happier Fitchner would be knowing the greatest endeavor of his legacy was to save lives instead of to take them. And I think that that's fantastic as far as it goes with evacuating and moving people out of Tinos for the most part, taking as many of these people away as they can, and not choosing to proceed with the underground drilling, take up the city's operation that would have resulted in long-term Martian devastation.
It certainly tracks. I think that in any situation, Fitchner wishing to save lives as opposed to taking them would have rang true. I think that quote is something to be revered as truth.
Yeah. It's also great because here we are standing with Dancer, staring out over all of these various decisions that are happening and being made to help the Sons of Ares and to free and extend, free isn't necessarily the right word, but to extend the legacy of Bryn, his wife, I think they were married, wife, just that much further. And that's just, it feels like an ode. And I really think this line, for whatever reason this time, made me think and reflect about how much in this book I kind of miss Fitchner's presence, because his whole thing, like, yes, he and Severo share a lot of different qualities, but ultimately he's got a layer of thickness and wisdom to him that stretched beyond just kind of the humor that Severo has and sort of the brotherly relationship that was there. It just opens up a different context that I feel like to some degree this book is missing, because Darrow and Severo are now the light that are spreading, like we talked about earlier.
So I agree with you to a certain extent, but at the same time, I don't think there would have been much of a book if Fitchner was still alive, because that year of Darrow being missing and presumed dead for the 9 months of it or whatever it was, I think he would have just kind of started over. I don't think he would have taken further action. I don't think he would have mounted any sort of army. I don't think Fitchner would have done much of anything other than lay back up a little bit, be quiet, draw as little attention as possible, and start training another infiltrator. I think he'd have to. Like, and that's not conducive to a story to jump into, you know?
I guess the usefulness of this argument ends at the triumph of Darrow at the end of Golden Sun, right?
Yeah.
There is space for the conversation of what, because the world at large at the end of Golden Sun knows that he's Fitchner before he's even executed, right? Because he saves Darrow, even if Darrow gets caught and Fitchner for some reason doesn't die. That sends us on a very different, complete track of the story. I don't feel like Fitchner would have completely given up hope on Darrow, a lot of his friends, but I do think that at a certain point he would have given up, like you're saying.
Yeah.
I just don't think of it so immediately. I'm thinking more about his presence as a character, but also
that's fair.
Ideologically, I understand where you're coming from and where that fits into the plot.
Right.
Yeah. It's comforting to also reflect back and think about Fitchner in moments like these and be like, yes, okay. The voice of semi-reason, but also shitposty, miss you, buddy.
Yeah. For sure.
And yeah, I mean, just this part is very reminiscent for me to the part in Red Rising where Darrow and Fitchner are standing atop, not Darrow and Fitchner, Darrow and Dancer are standing atop and looking over the skyline and all of the lights and everything else in the distance, and they're kind of having that very open and frank conversation while taking a swig of alcohol back and forth and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
It just feels like it's got that same sense of hominess to the whole scene. And I really like the line, maybe that's just the nature of us ever wishing for things that were and could be rather than things that are and will be. And I feel like out of the entire book, that is a great line that encapsulates humanity and sort of anxiety in the way that we think about the future.
Yeah.
And love it for what it is.
I mean, I think you'd hit the nail on the head and encapsulates like humanity in general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good. This like little tiny chapter that's tucked in here is filled with a number of great reflections. It's in Morningstar more than Golden Sun, we get a combination of monologue and action that feels a lot more balanced than Golden Sun or Red Rising were. Like the action to monologue was a little bit over top in Red Rising initially, and then Golden Sun goes action heavy with good internal monologues that make sense and external character development. And then so far with Morningstar, it kind of strikes a balance between the two because there is a lot of changing from war crimes, torture. I mean, all kinds of things that are going on here inside of our characters' heads.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have a whole lot to add to that, but
sure. That was more of a general thought. So you were a good man, says Dancer. Yeah. Then why do I want to do bad things, says Darrow. And I think this gets back to a critical difference in character that we see is that Darrow's conversations with Lorne really kind of harken back to that sense of the sort of, what's the word? Distant warrior. Okay. One that's, been forlorn isn't the right word even, but like actually is sorrowful of his actions and other things like that. And he's like, God, like, I want to do bad things because that's what I'm so good at. This is what I found out that I'm good at. And I want to take out this violence because I know that I'm good at violence. And he's just kind of questioning that out loud with the one person that he feels like he can question that with.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
I can get behind that.
It's an interesting conversation between the two.
Right.
So to wrap up the chapter, did you make anything of the sudden conversation that stopped between Mustang and Deanna, Darrow's mom?
Ooh, I don't know. I'm thinking it's something romancy. I don't know. That's just the feeling I'm getting off of it. I think this is something kind of like Mustang asking for the maternal permission to court her son. I don't know.
It could be. Is that where you're?
That's where my mind's going.
Okay.
I don't know. Because I don't know what else they could really have other than just kind of sharing stories of Darrow back and forth. But that seems not necessarily like on target for what I think that either of them would do. Some sort of surprise for Darrow is what I think. Maybe it's a birthday party. I don't know.
Fine. A birthday party? Are you for real on the birthday party?
Oh
my God,
you know what?
Man.
You know what? No, I am for real on that. I am putting that as a prediction. I will wager a drink on that one. I think it's a birthday party or something similar. A similar birthday / anniversary / some sort of milestone annual event party.
Fine. That is the thing that a mom would do. So,
and a friend, a really close friend.
Mustang, just a close friend?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So with that,
and maybe future
moving on. that's where I thought you were going. I was gonna say, like, they definitely made like partnership references in the last section we were talking about. So I don't know what you're missing out on here. Anyway, moving into the next section, I know we breezed over that one. That's because thankfully it's only 3 pages. Woo! Chapter 40, Yellow Sea. The definition of Io, the planet, is just wonderful. I love the harsh reality of the desert and the volcanic descriptions of this planet, the moonlords associated with it, the underground tidal pools that provide water and everything else, and kind of the way that it's a breadbasket despite the surface being mostly desertous unless it's underneath the shields that provide for the population.
Mm-hmm.
That's fascinating to me. What did you think of the history associated with the people here as well, tying that in?
Just kind of the shaped by nuclear radiation kind of deal, or their personal like views of themselves as being as close as anybody else to the Iron Golds. What in what respect do you mean?
I guess my thought was more, and I think that this rolls forward into some of the other context that's provided for in the next section. And so I think we'll get into it on the whole, but I think it's important to think about kind of the way that they've changed and elongated, the way their biology is a little bit different even.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess there's the ego that goes with being like the iron golds and kind of that perception, that pride. And then you've got the sort of interesting divergences in they aren't different species. They're still golds. They're still divisions of human, but they're definitely different planetary sects. We don't like have that broken up. We don't have that sort of kingdom broken out yet for what people are on different planets and how they might change and stretch and whatnot to adapt to reality. But it's consistently described how these folks have eyes that are a third larger than regular humans.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's super cool, and I'm excited to hear more about it. But I didn't without the history behind it, I don't have a lot to glean from it. I guess I do know that like humanity has evolved fairly significantly from what we know as humans today. So I think being in a completely different environment lends itself to evolving in whatever ways most beneficial to them on this moon in this environment. But it could also just be mutation.
That's going to happen, right? I think it is mutation over time. It's not Carvers. It's mutation based on the description. Yeah, it's definitely interesting. How do you feel about Sephi here? Are you as nervous as Darrow and Mustang are about her?
No, not at all. I think she can handle herself. And I think, unlike a lot of people in that sort of brooding show of force position that she's kind of in right now, she also knows when to be quiet. She's intimidating. She's going to be a show of force, but she's also adept enough and quiet enough to be acceptable in the way of diplomacy.
She's definitely a very unique character.
She is. Very much so. And she circles her food, which is super fucking cool. Or, I don't know, what she perceives as maybe potentially her food.
Her food, yeah. I mean, Vila Au Ra, I guess.
Yeah. How she's just like circling around her.
Mm-hmm.
Menacingly.
So, obviously, Darrow is still waiting around because he's being basically stood up by Romulus and the other Moon Lords who are supposed to meet him here. And ultimately, he's sort of sitting there speculating. And this wonderful line arrives, which is, if the need arises, I've got myself a psychotic goblin-sized fighter pilot. And fighter jet, which is fucking hilarious, right? As a comparison, because similarly, Ragnar used the exact same rocket launcher to take down Cassia's ship less than 100 pages ago.
It makes me think of, what Spider-Man movie was it with the Green Goblin?
Spider-Man 1.
Was it 1?
3.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I'm imagining with Severo on grav boots with a fucking rocket launcher is just the Green Goblin wreaking havoc.
Yeah.
Sorry, I mean missile launcher, not rocket launcher, just fucking missile launcher.
You know, to some degree, same difference. We'll take it. But yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think that it's hilarious of an image. Like it's a wonderful image. Mm-hmm. We love Severo. It's as though we like took a shot off air, but we didn't, and we're stumbling all of a sudden. It's fine. Yep. So
I guess going back to the missile versus rocket launcher thing, when I think of a rocket launcher, I think of an RPG,
mm-hmm.
whereas a missile launcher, I think of like, I don't know, the missile launcher in Halo, just a straight up homing missile that you can control yourself.
That was a rocket. Wait, the missile launcher in Halo.
Yeah.
Are you thinking Unreal? Unreal had a Redeemer that you could control.
No, I think it was Halo. Which Halo was it? But there was one that you could shoot it, but you could also like jump into its view and control it and sort of move it.
I don't recall that. It reminds me of the Unreal Redeemer. Anyway, moving on.
Sorry.
No, you're good. And then we meet Vila Au Ra, delegate for the Moon Lord Sovereign, Romulus Au Ra, which we mentioned earlier. She's also the sister and does not speak for her brother, as she says, inviting Darrow and Mustang and not Sephi or Severo, because they're
explicitly
both
not them.
Yeah, they're both savage idiots, just sitting there being assholes or being really quiet looking cannibal for some reason. In Sephi's case,
a cannibal.
No, but she kind of looks like one based on Vila's reaction.
Space racist.
She's kind of afraid. I guess cannibal might be a bit of an overstatement. But they're invited out to his private estate to
I see you.
discuss matters. Leave me alone. So, I mean, obviously we know that they get there and that it's safe, right? But there's definitely some questions about at first that kind of arise when you're thinking about it. You're like, is this a good idea? Why are you guys doing this? But we quickly learn that it's okay. Severo wraps up the chapter with a wonderful fucking line. Happy diplomacy, kids. You too, Horsey. We're in this together, eh? Calling Mustang Horsey kills me every time.
Yeah, it's so good.
Like, fuck.
It's so good.
So good. So chapter 41, The Moon Lord. And man, does this have a shockingly different feel to it. This entire chapter and the next chapter feel different in a way where Darrow is acting mature in a diplomatic relationship with other people as opposed to trying to outmaneuver them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like there's a different level of stakes here that's new and invigorating.
Right.
So one of the things that I find very interesting is after walking into the private abode, I've heard the Rim is different. They do not kill children here, but everyone likes to pretend that they don't kill children. I think that this is really interesting because the Board of Quality Control really doesn't have the same impact out on the Rim. They still have their institutes. They still send their children off, but they don't intentionally prevent their children. They don't put their younger children through survival of the fittest.
Right.
In the same sort of way that the Corps does.
Right. Which it's curious as to why. What do they actually believe? Do they believe survival of the fittest is the best way to produce leaders? And if so, does that mean they're intentionally not doing what is best for the leadership of the Rim in their eyes as a means of subjugating them? Or do they fear retribution for cruelty done by the leaders of the Rim? Like there's a lot of different ways that could be interpreted. Like if they're truly buying into the idea of survival of the fittest and the Institute as Darrow knows it, then denying the Rim of that sort of situation would ensure, hypothetically, that they don't get the same level of leadership and therefore can't mount an ineffective attack against them.
Yeah. It's
separate people making separate decisions. One of those several things that I mentioned.
Yeah, man, I think it really, like, as you mentioned, they don't necessarily have what feels like a solid ideology. And so I feel like that's part of the reason that they're rallying under Romulus, right, is that he feels solid. I do also think that Lorne, to some degree, embodied ideals of the Rimgolds, despite being from Mars. You know, he kind of had similar mentalities, and they kind of have this sort of feeling like if the entire culture here at large and sort of the society worships Greek and Roman mythology, then the Rim feels like a group of Stoics, and the Corps feels like the consistently fighting Greeks and other philosophers who are arguing with each other constantly.
Okay.
Wherein the Stoics are very much like, yeah, reality is reality and we deal with it as it comes. And this is sort of the way that we shake out. We try to sort pride out of things. We aren't perfect, but we try. And we try to instill these beliefs by doing these things, even though we aren't perfect. So blah.
Fair enough.
That's the read that I get on sort of the general moral philosophy, but I don't think that.
But who sets up the institutes?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get to, right? So I think that the institutes are still, like, the proctors are obviously appointed by the governors. So man, it's tough. I think that might still be their own boards of quality control, but maybe there are divisions. You know, maybe it's a little bit different. And in all seriousness, I think that there would be space for a novella that could take place inside of an institute out here, or like a nice short story or a comic book. Even they're nice. That's what I like so much about this universe. I feel like is that there are things that I don't need answers to, but are interesting corners to mentally explore. And I feel like he's created such a nice space for an actual system of worlds to exist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting. So they're obviously different. We're introduced to Seraphina Raw, the daughter of Romulus, and she's a really interesting gold. She's the first child that we've met. Darrow admits that basically on the page, saying Pierce has been hiding kids from you intentionally. And the Golds in general hide their kids intentionally because they don't want them to be assassinated or killed because they've already been through hell in order to survive. But she is interesting. She basically states servants, but I haven't earned servants. And I think that's another great example of the texture difference out here in the Rim versus the spoiled children we've come to know in the core. And we don't really know them, but we know what they grow into, right?
Mm-hmm.
Exposed to pixies and everything else, and or exposed like pixies to everything else. So,
right.
Yeah. She's just different. Seraphina's just a bit different.
Yeah. They alluded to it a couple times of whether or not it was planned or set up or whatever, and they never answered it. And I'm curious to see if that interaction with Seraphina was intentionally like planned and choreographed, or if it was just happenstance.
They also, they do lean into that. Isn't that kind of funny? I also like that it's kind of
they lean into
tongue
it
in cheek
multiple times and never give her any sort of response.
Right. He's like, well, would you believe me even if I told you the truth? And Darrow's like, no. So it's like, well, okay, then. It kind of equivocates itself and makes us kind of question it. But I have a tough time believing that Seraphina was faking it. Now, whether or not she was extracting some kind of information from Darrow, or completely different.
I'm not even necessarily thinking that, but just the presence of Seraphina being coordinated by Romulus.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I
would
naturally produce that conversation. Not that the conversation itself was being curated in any sort of way, but just the meet cute of Seraphina and Darrow being.
Where the fuck did that term come from?
I have no
It's
fucking
emerged
idea.
in like the last year, and I hate it.
Oh no, like that term's existed for forever.
Oh man, I've never heard it, and I've like existed in screenwriting circles for a long time, and
like,
it's definitely shared in screenwriting circles. That's where I'm seeing it.
I want to say there's some zombie TV show that
all right,
that surrounds, like, one of the main locations is a butcher shop called the Meat Cute.
Is that iZombie?
I think it might be iZombie.
Maybe. I feel
that
like
sounds right.
Reason.
That sounds right.
Anyway, I totally agree with you that Seraphina does kind of have this weird like meet cute moment. It does feel
like not in a romantic way, obviously, but
right. Of course not. In the sort of coincidence way. Yeah. It's interesting, and I think that's why I also like the follow up where Darren Romulus kind of discussed it out loud. He's like, "Did you plan that?" And he's like, "I don't know. Do you think I planned it?" And that's kind of a great character moment for Romulus too. I don't know. I really enjoy it.
Yeah.
I think that the Raws are a very interesting family.
Speaking of the term Romulus, though,
fucking
wolves, fucking Romulus and Remus versus
founded Rome.
Like, I think this is destiny.
You think that Darrow and Romulus are destiny?
Well, Romulus following Darrow is going to happen because of words.
The historical connection.
I think this is Piers Brown dropping hints on us.
Dropping super hint bombs. Like, hey, in case you didn't get like the literal megaton nuclear references in the last chapter, here is a literal bomb.
First name of the character that we're interacting with.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a good point. And it's definitely interesting. It does have a kind of metaphorical or allegorical connotation to it on the back end. So,
yeah. I was trying to do that internally without breaking out of the actual text of the book, but my point is I think Piers Brown chose the name Romulus on purpose for this character.
Mm-hmm. Could not confirm nor deny. I was definitely going to say something different, and I almost slipped up, and then I said it 3 times before my brain was like, yep, we're not going to say that.
Cool. Fair enough.
So, what do you make of the conversation with Romulus and the rules that he has for his family, and kind of the way that Gold in Golds in the Rim operate. He's very honest about it. And he's like, my kids don't have their iPads until they're 12. I
mean, to a certain extent, it reminded me of Lorne, but in a more modern way, if that makes sense. Like,
that's fair. Lorne has like an archaic attitude.
Yeah, and like that's totally fine. But this is more of the modern and realistic application of somebody following Lorne's ideals to the best of their abilities while also trying to raise a family and be the lord of a moon. Like there's a lot of distractions there, and you probably can't follow Lorne's advice to the T, but using it as a guide and being as true to it as you reasonably can. Like you and Pierce Brown reading Meditations all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're not anywhere close to Marcus Aurelius. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah,
but
actually.
I can see the influences that it has on your life and your decision making and your choices and everything. So I get that sort of vibe off of Romulus.
I think, man, this is so interesting. I have deep adoration for the Moon Lords as far as they go as characters, and the Rim Lords, variously as they're referred to. I think that they compose a very interesting sect of society because they still believe in the pyramid of society, but they they understand what they're doing to the people within the pyramid. They acknowledge.
Is that
actively.
Worse?
I don't know, but at the very least, they're honest about it. I think that, man, the ability to be honest about something horrible that you're doing, I think, is a quality that isn't respected enough when people can admit that they're doing something wrong. In the path of redemption, more often than not, is the only way that I think it's acceptable.
As opposed to justifying their actions?
Correct. I don't think that they're trying to strictly justify it here. I think they understand the place, but I do find the Moon Lords very interesting within the society. I think that they are a very small grade better than the core Golds. Yeah, as far as it goes in terms of the
certainly. I think
reasons.
Leaps and bounds better, but they're still part of the same society.
So we obviously get this crazy intense conversation about the various things that are going on with the Moon Lords. We get a lot of background picture that we hadn't really gotten before. We're near the shipyards of Ganymede and other things like that. And then we find out that Romulus isn't here necessarily just to talk to Darrow, but he's here to also talk with an agent of the Sovereign. And we find out who the Sovereign sent to negotiate. And that leads us into the final chapter of this week, which is fucking a third of the read, practically. Chapter 42, The Poet. I seriously think that this might be the longest chapter. So I love kind of the analysis of Darrow again seeing Roke and reacting to Roke very differently, like we mentioned earlier between he and Cassius. He looks at him and he says, he is a soldier of his people. I'm a soldier of mine. He is not the evil of his story. He's the hero who unmasked the Reaper. And fuck, man, that's a fair point.
Yeah.
But Roke is a real asshole here. And I think Pierce Brown did a magnificent job of doing the whole we're always the hero of our own story thing here.
I mean, this is the Empire did nothing wrong kind of sentiment.
Right. Exactly. And he does a great job of portraying why they line up and think about things that way, or why Roke lines up and thinks about things that way. And I'm so angry that this is the trajectory of Roke. I just didn't believe it. I just don't want to believe it. But here we are.
I mean, we're here.
Yeah. So Roke addresses Mustang, and she replies, "Don't talk down to me, poet. You're the weeping sword here, not me. This isn't about love. This is about what is right. This has nothing to do with emotion. It has to do with justice, which rests upon the facts." And Mustang is just like smacking him with the truth, which is wonderful here.
Do you believe her?
Do I believe Mustang that it's about truths and facts?
In that this sort of decision-making process is entirely apathetic.
Well, Not entirely, because ultimately they're withholding information, right? So ultimately they're lying.
Okay.
You know? Like, ultimately, Darrow and Mustang are lying because they know that the Jackal has the bombs. They're withholding information at the very least.
I meant back up a little bit. Look at it from a larger scale. This isn't about love. This is about doing what's right. That's more what I'm talking about. Oh, yeah.
About. Like, yeah, I think Mustang believes.
Do you think she's acting... And I know the term apathetic is a little bit strong for that, but I can't think of a weaker form of apathy. Acting without being clouded by emotion.
Yeah, I think that she is just able to dial into the reality of what needs to be done here. And that's what she is putting into this negotiation. Is it's not about emotion. And this negotiation is not going to be about emotion. This negotiation is going to be about fact. And that's what kind of Pierce Brown is also laying the ground for here, so that we set it up so that we can see that also the Rimgolds respond, for the most part, better to fact than emotion. However, they do also respond well when their horns get tooted as far as society goes, because they almost sway all the way back to Roke at one point in this chapter.
Right. That's true.
There's
some fucking ego there.
Definitely a play. And he knows how to manipulate it, but that was an emotional play. It wasn't a factual one, which is ultimately, I think, why they win. It's a seed that's planted here that pays off within the same chapter, but I think it's a good one.
Yeah, I agree.
So the lone question that we have to answer between the two groups here is who can give more in return? And then the pair of men and Mustang begin to argue their points for their sides.
It seemed odd.
Yeah?
This whole thing seemed real odd to me.
What about it?
It was essentially an auction. It was an auction for alliances. And I don't think that's a reliable basis for an alliance. I think that's an alliance that you're just waiting to be broken.
I think both alliances have this tinge of temporary to them.
What do you mean, right? Both?
I think that
both proposed. Both
choosing to side with the sovereign has the temporary benefit and has a temporary nature to it, and choosing to side with Darrow has a temporary nature to it. There isn't a permanent decision that's necessarily being made here, because, as Mustang mentions, anything that the sovereign promises can likely be reneged at a moment's notice. And Darrow has to actually win the war that he's claiming to win in order for anything to be possible. So really, it's the Rim Lords that are in the tight spot, and they have to make a decision. So they're basically listening to competitors debate around the premise of their ideas. And you know what? I work in fucking sales in Enterprise, and this is what we call an RFP, which is to say, basically an acquisition process in which you run through all of the different dialogues, even if they're close or similar, to make sure which most closely aligns with you. So it feels real, but I do understand where you're coming from, where there's this element of, well, obviously, dudes, like...
Yeah. I don't know where to go from there. I don't think I really have anything else to say about that.
I mean, fair. So Roke, is the mouthpiece of the Sovereign, offers the Rimloads, Jesus Christ, Rimlords.
You are making my job so much easier here.
Fuck. Offers the Rimlords some freedom, reduced taxes, increased representation, mining contracts, permits, being allowed to select the Olympian Knights as opposed to having the Sovereign just choose them. Basically a bunch of governmental freedoms in trade for their support against the Red Menace, in quotes.
All right. So we've got the term mouth. We got rim. We got loads. I'm going to let you fill in the blank with whatever rim job joke you want. And let's continue from there.
I'm leaving. So Darrow counters with a strong left hook. It's complete autonomy for the rim, provided that Darrow is able. Jesus Christ, we're dissolving here at the end. Darrow is able to win the war.
I can see you like racing against your own sobriety.
Racing against what?
Your own sobriety.
Oh no, I'm fine. I'm more concerned about
you just said
time.
Dable?
Correct. It's not sobriety. It's against the clock.
Well, it is late. Yeah, that's true.
Nightmare fuel. Okay, so Darrow countering with this feels very weak and flimsy, right? Like, yes, sure, you're offering total autonomy to the Rim, but that means that you have to win, and there's no guarantee that you're going to win. You know, Mustang shuts down what Roke's saying, Roke shuts down what Darrow's saying, Darrow's ultimately left without a good place to go from, except for his kind of last resort to some degree. Mm-hmm. We found out that he's already planned this in advance. There were also references in the previous chapter where Darrow was like, I wonder if I'm laying the ground for betrayal with Dancer. And he recants, I have no interest in the Rim. This is not my home. We are not enemies. My war is not against your race, but against the rulers of my home. What do you think of the whole... I don't know, the dialogue here.
Just because of the way that you posited that and sort of placed those two points together, is Dancer from the Rim?
No, Dancer is from Mars.
He is from Mars. Okay. There was something there, which if Dancer had been from the Rim, that would have made a ton of sense, but I think I just was reading into that too much. That's cold, but it makes sense. At the same time, aren't they evacuating that moon?
They are.
Doesn't it say that right around there that all the Reds are being moved off the moon anyway?
Darrow had issued warnings for evacuation, but there were likely still thousands of people that weren't going to be able to evacuate.
Well, I mean, that's their fault.
Is it?
Yeah.
They weren't expecting to be sold out.
Well, I mean, sold out, or all he's saying is he's not going to recruit them. It's not. No. They're not being sold out.
No, these are active. I'm thinking a little bit ahead. Yes, correct. You're right. I'm thinking about when he actually sells out the Sons of Ares cells.
Yeah, that's a little
bit later.
No,
that's a little bit later.
I think that's where the evacuation is.
Correct.
Listed.
Correct. That's where the evacuation is listed. He's saying continue your oppression of colors within the society. That's okay. This is my home. He's accepting those things. Sorry, I jumped ahead a little bit. He's willing to accept that.
It's two very similar things.
Yeah.
But he's already evacuating all of the Sons of Ares locations. So is he essentially, at that point, he is essentially bartering for safety from the Sons of Ares? Like, here are all of the locations of the Sons of Ares bases. They're empty now because we've evacuated, but we're not coming back to this moon. Is that essentially what he's saying? Not that he's saying that out loud, but that's kind of what he's actually offering.
So there are two different offers here, right? There's the first offer, which says, my concern is not with the Rim, and I don't care about the lower colors in the Rim. Of course, I do care about the lower colors in the Rim, but I understand that in order for this partnership to work, I need to accept that I cannot save everyone. And that's kind of where he leans into the moral side of the Moon Lords, right? So he kind of nudges them that way. Yeah. Roke then comes back with, I know this man better than any of you, and I know him like a brother, and he is a liar. He would say whatever it took to break the bonds that bind us together. And Roke is right. He is a liar. And I don't know
if I agree with that.
Darrow is a prolific liar.
I think he's a prolific. Okay. I don't believe that lying by omission is lying. And he's very, very prolific at that. But he's not super, he doesn't have a crazy long track record of actually outright lying to people. Because in text, narrated every time he says something that is a lie, he says immediately afterwards to himself that he's lying. And it's not that often. It's just a lot of lying by omission, which I don't see as actually lying.
I guess lying by omission is fine until it's found out, but I also don't fully agree with that. So just to kind of back up, I think Roke's point is to say that he knows him like a brother. He does. He went through the Institute with him. He knows him throughout the entirety of Golden Sun. He understands, obviously, that he's a liar because he was a part of the group that dismantled the lie. And the lie was that Darrow was a gold, right? Which is not lying by omission. He was consistently lying that he was a gold.
Right. That's true.
So, I don't know. There are other components of that are there. But for for me, it's not so much about this in particular lie. I just wanted to state
but
that
he was never asked if he was a red and said, no, I'm a gold.
I mean, there was kind of a nudge with Severo at the end of Red Rising, but yeah,
a little
fine.
bit. But I feel like that doesn't count as explicitly lying.
But it's lying about your origins, right? It definitely still is lying.
There's that. There's lying about your origins. But also, anytime he talks about his fake family, all of it is rooted in the memories of his father.
Yeah.
Like,
so
the only
PJ,
thing you're right. You're right.
No, with what you're saying, PJ, this is actually how I defend Roke's take generally, is that I think that in a reality in which Darrow wasn't lying, all of these various components that you're citing that he's being truthful about but not telling the full truth would be enough to sway Roke for the most part.
Yeah.
So that's where like my brain goes on the tangent, but I do agree with you and understand. I just wanted to segue between that and the decision that Darrow makes with giving up the cells of the Sons of Ares. Yes, he issued an evacuation that is going to save some lives, but it's not going to save all of the lives. It's not going to save anywhere near all of the lives of the 350 cells.
Depending on how long it takes.
Right.
You know, like how long does it take to make that agreement solid?
Almost immediately. They're rallying their fleets right after this, in this moment.
Right. But how long? Yeah. Good point. You're right.
They're like within 20 minutes we need to do this, and he unblocks the signal and lets him go through. That's when Darrow leaves and he decides to go confront Roke and talk with him, and we get kind of the last part of the chapter. The one thing I want to mention before we move to that component of the chapter is the brief mention here. Do not let Darrow manipulate you into bringing back the Dark Age that came before. Uh-oh. Oh no.
Oh,
what are we going to do about the Dark Age?
So it is capitalized, but I think that's the way I read that is that it's capitalized in the way that the Renaissance is capitalized. In that it is the title of a period of time in their history.
Mm-hmm.
But it is fucking ominous. But maybe we'll find out that in the Dark Age, the Reds were living freely and eating bonbons every day, which that sounds pretty fucking good. I think I'm going to agree that that's what it is.
I definitely agree.
Perfect. Glad we're in agreement.
Bonbons forever. So Darrow then shortly thereafter, as we'd mentioned, gives up all of the cells of the Sons of Ares within the Rim for Romulus' support. And Mustang really does the coup de grace, revealing the location of the cache of weapons on asteroid S-1988, which really pretty much does it for Romulus and sends him off into a tirade, and most of the other Moonlords agreeing with him.
Mm-hmm.
It's something. Roke completely crumbles under the discussion of the depot
and gives away the fact
grovels.
that the depot exists, which I think is the biggest issue.
A massive misstep on his part.
Yeah.
At that moment, he lost all control of the room.
I'm guessing he wasn't that well versed in how to deal with discussions on the depot.
Totally true. For a couple of different textual reasons, right? So Octavia specifically mentioned saying that she didn't give him any kind of information about the Jackal and the Rim clearly, because otherwise he would have mentioned it. Like, it clearly would have been something, and if she would have let him inside of that circle, that means that he would have been important enough to know, and that trust would have made a big difference.
Right.
Even Octavia doesn't trust Roke with information, which doesn't so much speak
seem
to
to
Roke.
Be one to trust anyone with information, though. Correct.
All that I'm ultimately saying is there's some irony between Octavia not trusting Roke and Darrow Darrow not trusting for a very different reason, but there is an irony for him being caught in the middle here and choosing the wrong side. So that is given up. He goes into an absolute rant, chooses to side with the Sons of Ares to expunge the Sword Armada, and Mustang rallies the forces while Darrow follows after Roke. Darrow runs after him and says, "Roke, when did I lose you?" And he replies, "When Quinn died. Gold, red, it doesn't matter. Your spirit is black. Quinn was good, Leah was good, and you used them. You are ruined, Darrow. You drain your friends of life and leave them spent and wasted in your wake, convincing yourself each death is worth it. And holy fuck, is that good. It's just a wonderful send-off to this very long chapter. The other part of this chapter that I really appreciate that we didn't really touch on is the poem that he reads. It's an original poem that Pierce wrote. I think it does a fantastic job of painting kind of Roke as this warrior poet, and it feels very referential to a lot of the other poetry that Pierce has either referenced or talked about.
Like, it's a great poem.
So we end the week with Roke being in a terrible position. Darrow and Mustang having won over an ally. They're on a 3-win streak, technically speaking, if you skip over the loss of Ragnar.
I don't think you get to skip over that.
Fuck. Okay, so they lost Ragnar, but are on a win streak now-ish, too. With that, we move into your predictions. So PJ's predictions. So first question for you. Well, let's back up. Do you have anything else on chapter 42?
I don't think so. I'm excited to see what the daughter brings to the table going forward.
Serafina?
Yeah. Interesting. Does she get fed jelly beans?
You're fired. So PJ's predictions. That's not it. Severo starts with an S.
He should eat jelly beans too.
He probably likes jelly beans.
As everyone does.
What's your point?
Jelly beans are awesome.
Jelly beans. So next week, big war, probably?
Yes. Big war. Many pew pew pew.
It feels like it's building up to that. I'm glad that you're acknowledging that feels likely. And I'm just going to accept the fact that I wrote a question that
was a pretty dumb question.
It was a dumb question. What other question do you ask about next week?
I don't know. This is
good
your
question.
job.
I have 3 more.
I have to answer the questions that you write. This is your job. I'm not answering my own questions.
So what's going on with the whole Mustang, Cavax, Daxo, Deanna thing? What's going on with all those interactions?
I think I mentioned it before, but I think it's the starting and the workings of an arranged marriage. So Mustang obviously is fatherless and motherless, but she was raised pretty heavily by Cavax, so he is kind of the de facto father. And I think Deanna she's clearly the matron of her family and respected by everybody. So I think they're planning on at least getting permission to join their families together. But also, I think Deanna is a little bit too smart for that. And I think she's going to be the one to usurp the power from everyone else and, I don't know, rule.
Interesting. We'll take that.
It's a lot of predictions in one question, but
guess
if any of them come true, then you have to drink.
Just once. You made like a layered prediction that you're definitely getting wrong. Okay. What's the jackal?
You're gonna fuck me over with that one, and every micro guess that doesn't come true is going to be for me.
I think that I've been really fair in the fact where if I'm like, this is a bullshit question that you provided a moderately accurate answer on, I take a drink too.
Yeah, so that's true.
What's the jackal most likely to do with the big boom buzz?
The big boom buzz. I think I mentioned before. I think he's going to seed some firepower into the Red Legion in order to sow some fear within the society as a whole and peg it on the Sons of Ares, even though it was technically a separate entity. And then as soon as he stockpiles enough of the helium-3 to essentially control the market, I think he'll be in a position to make whatever demand he wants and essentially not have to worry about repercussions. He can literally usurp power, usurp the sovereign title from Octavia without actually blowing anyone up.
Okay, cool. How are Roke and Antonia doing after next week?
I think that is Antonia, not Victra, correct.
Correct, Antonio. The side of the Sovereign's fleet out here in the rim.
I think there'll be some pot shots taken towards Darrow and his fleet. Otherwise, it's just going to be kind of looming menacingly towards, I don't know.
So, Roke lives next week?
He lives next week, yes.
Okay.
Antonio lives too. I think they just cause problems.
Sure.
Even if they're not present, I think they cause problems.
Fair enough. All right. Anything else?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, sounds good. So, going into next week we will be reading chapters 43 through 49, the second chunk of part 3, Glory.
Is that the end of part 3?
Yes. Yeah, it's the second chunk / the end of part 3. So we're going to be reading through part 3 up until part 4 stars. So that's where we'll leave you for this week. Continue to refer us to your friends. Anything that you can do to help us grow, leave us a review, recommend us on Spotify, follow along and subscribe on your preferred platform. All of that we really appreciate. Interact with us on any social media sites, Twitter and Instagram. We are at Words Whiskey Pod on both of those. Feel free to give us a follow. We post interesting content related to our drinks of the week, as well as the show card for each week, which we like to tune up with a little bit of the humor, precluding the next show. And we interact with people all the time on both Twitter and Instagram. So send us stuff. We love to see it, as mentioned a couple of different times in this episode. Beyond that, check out our website for all of our different cocktail recipes, as well as other components. We will very, very soon have our calendar up for most of the rest of the year, at the very least through Dark Age and the Sons of Ares comics. I've got all that mapped out, so that'll be coming out very, very soon. And yeah, beyond that, have a great week. Thanks.
Bye.